Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into one of the darkest and most chilling stories in American history. The life of Belle Gunness, a woman who went from a poor Norwegian farm girl to one of the most notorious female serial killers, known as Hell's Belle or the Lady Bluebeard. This is a tale of deception, greed, and cold-blooded murder that shocked the nation in the early 1900s. So, grab a drink, settle in, and let's unravel the twisted life of Belle Gunness, whose crimes left a trail of bodies and a mystery that's still unsolved over a century later. Let's start at the beginning. Belle was born Brynhild Paulsdatter Sturseth on November 11, 1859, in a small rural village called Selbu in Norway, back when it was part of Søndre Trondheim County, now Trøndelag. She was the youngest of 8 kids in a dirt-poor family. Her dad, Paul Peterson Sturseth, was a stonemason, and her mom, Berit Olsdatter, was a homemaker, scraping by on a tiny farm called Sturset Kjøret. Life in Selbu was tough. Think long winters, rugged landscapes, and barely enough food to go around. By age 14 in 1874, Brynhild was confirmed in the Lutheran Church, a big deal marking her step into adulthood. But even as a kid, she was driven, working hard to escape poverty. As a teenager, she started as a dairymaid, milking cows and herding cattle on nearby farms to save every penny she could. Neighbors described her as tall and strong. By adulthood, she was at least 5'7" and over 200 pounds, with a muscular build that had later come in handy for her gruesome crimes. There's this old story, though it's not fully verified, that might explain her dark turn. Rumor has it, as a teen, she got pregnant by a local farmer's son who beat her up at a country dance, causing a miscarriage. Not long after, that guy supposedly died under mysterious circumstances, maybe poisoned. Some say this trauma sparked her vengeful streak, but historians debate if it's true or just a dramatic tale, like something out of Camilla Bruce's novel, In the Garden of Spite. Either way, growing up in rural Norway in the mid-1800s wasn't easy. Industrialization was happening, but places like Selbu were stuck in the past. A lot of Norwegians dreamed of a better life in America, inspired by letters from relatives who'd made the trip across the Atlantic. By her early 20s, Brynhild had saved enough to chase that dream. In 1881, at 21, she boarded a ship to America, leaving behind her family and the limits of her small village, ready to reinvent herself in the land of opportunity. When she landed at Castle Garden, in New York City, the immigration hub before Ellis Island, she changed her name to Belle or Bella, a common move for immigrants to blend in. She headed straight to Chicago, a booming city in the 1880s, packed with Scandinavian immigrants and endless possibilities, but also plenty of dangers. She joined her older sister, Nellie Larson, and her brother-in-law in Chicago's tight-knit Norwegian community. At first, Belle worked as a domestic servant, cleaning houses and watching kids for wealthy families. She was strong, hard-working, and determined, but she wasn't content scrubbing floors forever. Soon, she landed a job at a butcher shop, where she learned to wield meat cleavers and carve up carcasses, skills that, chillingly, she'd use later in ways no one could have imagined. People who knew her back then said she was imposing, tall, broad-shouldered, with brown hair, blue eyes, and a no-nonsense attitude. She was obsessed with saving money and dreamed of owning land, a far cry from her poor roots in Norway. In 1884, at 24, she married Mads Ditlev Anton Sorensen, another Norwegian immigrant who worked as a night watchman at a department store. They settled in Chicago's Austin neighborhood and even opened a little candy shop together, selling sweets and confections. Things seemed normal for a bit, but then tragedy, or maybe something more sinister, hit. Their candy shop mysteriously burned down, and they collected a nice insurance payout. Later, their house caught fire too, bringing in another chunk of cash. These fires raised some eyebrows, but in the chaotic years after the Great Chicago Fire, no one dug too deep. Belle and Mads had kids, possibly 4, Carolyn, Axel, Myrtle, and Lucy, but the details are hazy. Some say 2 of the kids died young from acute colitis, which sounds a lot like poisoning symptoms. Belle cashed in insurance policies on both, and neighbors whispered she never looked pregnant, suggesting the kids might have been adopted or taken in for shady reasons, like insurance scams. Then, on July 30, 1900, Mads himself dropped dead, officially from a brain hemorrhage. But here's the kicker. It was the one day his two life insurance policies overlapped, netting Belle $8,500, about us $300,000 in today's money. Mad's family cried foul, suspecting strychnine poisoning, but the coroner called it natural, and no one pushed further. With that money, Belle bought a 48-acre pig farm in Porte, Indiana in 1901, setting the stage for her deadliest chapter. Porte was a quiet town, about 60 miles east of Chicago, perfect for Belle's dark plans. The farm, on McClung Road, was a former brothel with a red brick house, a barn, and outbuildings, isolated enough to keep her secrets. In April 1902, she married again, this time to Belle Gunness, a widowed Norwegian butcher with 2 daughters. Things went south fast. Peter's baby daughter, Swanhild, died under Belle's care, cause unknown. Then, on December 16, 1902, Peter himself died in what Belle called a freak accident. A sausage grinder supposedly fell off a shelf and crushed his skull while he was reaching for his shoes. Sounds sketchy, right? The coroner's jury thought so too, noting the wound looked more like a hatchet blow, but they ruled it accidental. Belle, pregnant at the time and crying at the inquest, collected $3,000 in insurance. She gave birth to a son, Philip, in 1903, and sent Peter's older daughter to live with relatives. Now she was left with Myrtle, Lucy, Philip, and an adopted girl named Jenny Olson. Taken in around 1900, neighbors thought Belle was strange, strong, reclusive, and tough on her kids, but chalked it up to her being a widow with 2 husbands, dead and insurance money in her pocket. Belle turned to a new scheme. She started placing ads in Norwegian language, newspapers like the Scandinavian and Minneapolis Tidende. These weren't your average Lonely Hearts ads. They read something like, "Personal comely widow who owns a large farm in one of the finest districts in LaPorte County, Indiana, desires to make the acquaintance of a gentleman equally well provided, with a view of joining fortunes. No replies by letter are considered unless the sender is willing to follow the answer with a personal visit. Triflers need not apply." She told suitors to bring cash, sell their assets, and keep their visits hush-hush. This was the bait for her deadly trap. From 1903 to 1908, Belle's farm turned into a killing ground. She lured dozens of men, mostly middle-aged Norwegian or Scandinavian immigrants, with promises of marriage and a share in her prosperous farm. They'd show up with their life savings, anywhere from $1,000 to $5,000, stitched into their clothes or packed in trunks. Belle would greet them warmly, serve a hearty meal spiked with strychnine or arsenic, and if the poison didn't do the trick, she'd finish them off with an axe or meat cleaver. Down in the basement, where her kids were forbidden to go, she'd dismember the bodies, dissolve them in quicklime, and bury them in shallow graves around the hog pen, garden, or nearby lake. Sometimes she'd let her pigs eat the remains, wiping out any evidence. Her hired hand, Ray Lamphere, a local drifter, helped with chores and maybe burials. Though he swore he didn't know the full extent of her crimes, Belle's kids saw strange men come and go but were too scared to talk. Jenny Olson once told a schoolmate, "My mama killed my papa. She hit him with a meat cleaver and he died." Don't tell a soul, but no one took it seriously. Jenny disappeared in 1906, supposedly sent to college in Los Angeles, but her body later turned up on the farm. The list of victims is long and grim. There was Henry Gerholt from Wisconsin, who brought $1,500 and vanished in 1904. John Moe from Minnesota, who withdrew $3,000 and was never seen again in 1906. Olaf Svenherud in 1905, whose body parts were found later. Ole B. Budsberg, a widower from Wisconsin, was identified by his sons through rings on his hands in 1907. Andrew Helgelian from South Dakota, who arrived with $2,900 in 1908. Olaf Lindblom in 1905, and others like George Berry, Christofferson, Emil Tell, Lee Porter, and Emil Greening. Then there were unnamed men whose trunks piled up in Belle's house. She also likely killed her foster kids and others for insurance money. Historian Bruce Johnson estimates at least 20 murders, but some sources say it could be 40 or more, including transients and farmhands. Belle's motive? Pure greed. She amassed a fortune, millions in today's dollars, through insurance, payouts, stolen savings, and property deals. Her methods were brutal but efficient. Strychnine caused agonizing convulsions that could pass for a heart attack. If that failed, she'd grab a hatchet or cleaver. She'd dismember bodies in the basement, sawing off limbs, removing heads to make identification harder, and stuffing parts into burlap sacks. The farm's isolation, 2 miles from town, kept things quiet. But locals started noticing soft spots in the soil and weird smells around the property. By early 1908, the walls were closing in. Andrew Helgelian's brother, Assel, got suspicious when Andrew disappeared and started writing to Belle. He showed up in La Porte, demanding answers. On April 27, 1908, Belle visited a lawyer to update her will, naming her kids as heirs and saying she feared Ray Lamphere, whom she'd fired after he got jealous of her suitors. That same night, her farmhouse went up in flames, set by kerosene in the basement. Firefighters found 4 bodies in the wreckage: Belle's kids, Myrtle, Lucy, and Philip, and a headless adult woman, assumed to be Belle. But the body was only 5'3" and 150 pounds, much smaller than Belle's 5'7", 200-plus pound frame. No skull was found, though dentures later matched Belle's dentist records. But many thought they were planted. Assel wasn't buying it. He insisted on digging for his brother. On May 3, 1908, workers found Andrew's hacked-up body in a shallow grave, stuffed in sacks. Over the next few days, they uncovered at least 11 more bodies and parts, torsos, limbs, heads, scattered across the farm, some in the hog pen, others near the outhouse. Police stopped counting at 12, but fragments hinted at more. The victims had signs of poisoning and blunt trauma. The farm became a morbid tourist attraction, with 15,000 people flocking in on special trains, turning it into a grim carnival. Complete with vendors selling trinkets. Ray Lamphere was arrested on May 22, 1908 for arson and murder. His trial in November 1908 revealed Belle's ads, letters from victims, and Ray's claim that she faked her death using a body double, maybe a transient woman she lured and killed. Ray was convicted of arson, but cleared of murder, getting 2 to 21 years. He died in prison from tuberculosis on December 30, 1909, but not before telling a cellmate that Belle escaped with $100,000, dressed as a man, and fled to California or Norway. He admitted to helping bury 42 men, but denied killing anyone himself. So, what happened to Belle? She withdrew most of her bank funds right before the fire, which fuels the escape theory. Sightings of her popped up everywhere: Chicago, New York, San Francisco, even Norway. One theory says she lived as Esther Carlson in Los Angeles until 1931, when Carlson was arrested for poisoning a suitor. She looked like Belle and died before her trial, with photos showing a striking resemblance. In 2008, forensic experts from the University of Indianapolis dug up the headless body from La Porte Cemetery for DNA testing, comparing it to descendants of Belle's sister. The results were inconclusive because the samples were too degraded, but the body was deemed too small to be Belle's. Other theories say she died in the fire, maybe killed by Lamphere in a jealous rage, or that she killed her kids and then herself. Most historians, like Jane Simon Amison in America's Femme Fatale, think she faked her death and started over somewhere else, maybe even continuing her crimes. There's no hard proof, and her death is still unconfirmed, with some sources mistakenly listing 1930 Belle Gunness' story is a haunting piece of American history. She inspired books like Hell's Princess by Harold Schechter, novels like In the Garden of Spite, and documentaries. Her farm is private property now, but La Porte still holds annual tours and has a museum exhibit. As America's deadliest female serial killer, she shatters the idea of women as just caregivers, showing how far ambition and greed can push someone. Her crimes shine a light on the struggles of immigrants, the shady world of insurance fraud back then, and the dangers of rural isolation. More than a century later, Belle's mystery endures, a poor Norwegian girl turned monster, whose final chapter we'll probably never know. That's it for today's deep dive into the chilling world of Belle Gunness. If you found this story as wild as I did, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for more true crime tales. Drop a comment below. Do you think Belle died in that fire? Or did she pull off the ultimate escape? Let's talk about it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.